What is good, streaming people? Welcome to CBS Sports HQ. We begin the show 4 wide. That's Pete Prisco. That's Brady Quinn. Next to Chris Hassel, I'm Tommy Tran. Guys, we had Monday Night Football games. It started simultaneously, some nail-biting finishes at the end. It was one of those things where you hoped you had that cable provider that had that multi-view, so you watched both at the same time.
Yeah, like the YouTube TV.
Yes.
I watched both of them at the same time. Pete, did you stay up for the end of the Dolphins game?
What are you talking about?
Well, I looked at your power rankings.
I never sleep.
I looked at your power rankings, and you were like an AP voter that doesn't stay up for the West Coast games. Dolphins,
mailed it in?
They're still in the top 5. They only dropped one spot.
Everybody else lost.
They lost as a 14-point favorite.
Who should be ahead of them? Who should they be behind?
Well,
why don't we get into this?
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Chris.
49ers 1, Cowboys up to 2, Ravens 3. So we're going to get to the Dolphins in just a second, but let's start at the top, Pete. You got the 49ers staying there as we give you fresh takes brought to you by Fresh Pet. It's not dog food, it's food. Cowboys up to number 2. How close are they to the 49ers at 1?
Why aren't they number 1? Did you have them ahead of the 49ers at one point?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
So why aren't they number 1 after that big win?
Because the 49ers have been playing better.
Is it because they've been playing better, or what happened when those two teams played?
The 49ers beat them.
Oh, okay.
It was a long time ago.
So now does that factor in? Is that why you have San Francisco ahead?
Time ago,
Someone told you that maybe this is how these two teams should be ranked.
It was a long time ago. The 49ers are the best team in the league right now. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, they're playing unreal football. They deserve to be in the number 1 spot. When everybody's healthy, they're fantastic.
And by the way, Brock Purdy deserves to be in the MVP conversation. He's not a system quarterback. He's a good quarterback.
Yes.
As does Christian McCaffrey. I hate the fact now that we've just relegated to saying the MVP is only for an NFL quarterback, because Tyreek Hill's had an unbelievable year. Christian McCaffrey's had an unbelievable year. Those guys deserve praise and consideration for being in that discussion. And right now, if you look at the betting favorites, it's all quarterbacks. And I'll be the first to tell you, every one of those quarterbacks should be in it, but so should the other players as well.
They are going to be in it. They will be considered. I just don't think they're going to win it. I think the quarterback will win it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at the odds, like Brady said, top 5 at least are all quarterbacks. Even Jalen Hurts is like 8-1. Tua was 8-1 going into last night, and you didn't see Christian McCaffrey on that betting list. Who would you vote for right now if it was between, and it is right now, Dak and Purdy?
It'd be Dak. I mean, Dak, to me, has done a phenomenal job of lifting up this offense. And I think, look, you hate admitting it, but he doesn't have Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. And yet he's still been able to put up the numbers he's putting up right now. I look at Dak and say he'd be most deserving of it at this moment. Now, we'll see how things pan out the rest of the way. They have a tough schedule ahead.
Well, since I have a vote, I'm going to dismiss myself.
You shouldn't. As you shouldn't. Good for you, Pete
That's
Prisco.
Just for you, Brady.
Good for you, Pete Prisco.
No, right now, my vote would go to Dak Prescott. I don't think there's any question about that in my mind. I think he's been fantastic. I think the Cowboys' offense has been fantastic. And I think Mike McCarthy, who, by the way, has taken a ton of criticism over the last couple years, most of it unwarranted, by the way, has done a great job with this team.
I was just going to say, someone's got to throw Mike McCarthy into consideration for it as well. I know he'll get some love for Coach of the Year and all that, but remember, a couple years ago, we were talking about potentially Dan Quinn taking over for him and just, not really sure what to think of Jerry Jones' thoughts on him. Now they've put themselves in a position to potentially be not only a Super Bowl contender, but maybe even fighting for that number 1 overall spot.
Another high-profile game with the Bills coming up. We'll talk about Buffalo in just a little bit. But let's get back to what Chris alluded to with the Dolphins. Now, Pete, take us through where you had the Dolphins when they were up 14 with just a couple minutes left to go, and then where you ultimately decided to just drop the ball.
Believe me, I don't sleep, unlike Mr. 14 hours a night over there. I think when I looked at the Dolphins, I thought, okay, if they win the game, they're going to probably be either 2 or 3. Probably 3. But if they win the game, they lose the game, and I'm sitting there going, okay, what do I got to change these things around? But then you look at the teams around them, and everybody else lost. Kansas City lost, Detroit lost, Jacksonville lost, all these teams lost. So you kind of stick them in that same spot. That was not a good look for the Miami Dolphins last night at all. I think you saw a bunch of things at play. I don't think Tua looked good. Even when Tyreek Hill was in the lineup, he was getting hit.
Injuries.
Injuries.
Connor Williams went out. Armstead wasn't there. Baker, I mean, they have a lot of injuries right now on this team to overcome. overcome.
And not having Jalen Phillips shows up in a big way as well, particularly on the last couple of drives when Will Levis was able to throw the football down the field and check it down and stand in there and make throws. So there are concerns about the Miami Dolphins. I didn't think Jalen Ramsey, did he make a play the entire game? I mean, he didn't do a lot, and he had some moments where he was beat. So
well, he got beat up a little bit by Levis running over there too.
I'm concerned about Miami right now. Now the schedule gets a lot tougher for the Dolphins, and Buffalo's right there. I mean, we thought that was a done deal, right? Dolphins win the division. You look at the two schedules, they're entirely different. They play the end of the season. So I think it comes down to whether Buffalo could beat Dallas this week, and then they'll be playing for the division title maybe.
I don't want to go off script because I know we've got a rundown here, and we want to talk about Cleveland next. But to me, the next team we should be talking about is Buffalo, because they looked like one of the hottest teams right now, winning 2 of their last 3. You could have made the case. Could have beat Philly in overtime. Should have been. It could be 3 in a row for them. So, to that point, if you're looking at the scariest team, that I think you look at the frustration from the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid about the call. Yes, it's about the call and how the season's gone for them. It's also about the fact that Buffalo's still alive. Like, they understood how big this loss was this past weekend, and Buffalo understands exactly how big it is with the road they have ahead. They're still very much in this race right now. That Week 18 game versus Miami could get very, very interesting as far as the playoff contention, but also even what the division looks like.
And we've been saying that here for a couple weeks, that if they get in, they're going to be the most dangerous team. And if they get in, the people around the league that are in already don't want to play them, by the way. If they want them to be the team that doesn't get in. You'd rather play the Colts, you'd rather play the Bengals, you'd rather play the Texans, Broncos, any of them other than the Buffalo Bills.
Let's give credit, by the way, to Joe Brady. The way that offense looks now, too. You look at James Cook, the way they kind of utilized him, moved him around, utilizing different pieces. You know, you'd say that's Josh Allen playing loose, playing, fast. But to me, it's the way he's utilizing the talent they have now, doing a few little wrinkles, that's just a little bit more creative to utilizing that personnel.
So if you look at that cluster of 7 and 6 teams in the AFC, it has Buffalo down at the bottom, but to your rankings, it's almost flip-flopped the other way, inverted. You have Buffalo at the top and all the other 7 and 6 teams down at the bottom.
Yeah, I love this Bills offense, particularly. You mentioned Joe Brady did some great things the other day, getting Cook in, and they were busts in the secondary, but they created some problems for that Chiefs defense, and that's a good Chiefs defense, by the way. But the other side of the ball was a little surprising to me. Okay, the Chiefs haven't been the Chiefs. You were there, Tommy. We were sitting there. They didn't move consistently against the Bills defense that's kind of depleted. And that tells you that that team and that a lot of those younger players are getting better. The 2 young linebackers that are playing now, they've improved a great deal. And some, get Benford back on the corner is big for them. So I think the defense as a whole is playing better, and that's the most important thing for Buffalo.
No doubt about it. I mean, look, you've got to be able to have defense. And I would say running game, too. Now, Josh Allen's going to be a part of that. I think the running game has still been inconsistent. But that being said, this is a team that's kind of finding itself at the right time, getting hot. We know how that works in the NFL, too, as they head into the playoffs. But the other 7 and 6 team you got to talk about is the Broncos. Because I think if we're being honest with ourselves, when we look at the top teams in the AFC playoff picture, Baltimore, Kansas City, they're looking at everyone and saying, like, who do we not want to play? Well, you don't want to play the Bills with Josh Allen. And I don't think you want to play a Sean Payton coached Denver Broncos team with Russell Wilson, who's won a Super Bowl, who's been to a couple, who has all this postseason experience. And this team is getting hot at the right time, and they're starting to believe in themselves, too. So the Broncos are, I think, the other team that you can maybe discount them whatever way you want. They're surprising everyone right now with how they've played now the last 7 games. And Russell Wilson is getting back into a form where he's looking a lot closer to what we saw in Seattle in his heyday.
I give Sean Payton a ton of credit here. I mean, let's be real. This team was going off the rails. It was a big problem. It didn't look good early in the season, and he kind of got them back together and regrouped them. He's done a great job with them. Their season might be decided this week at Detroit. I mean, you got a Detroit team that's reeling. They need the game in the worst way. And you have the Broncos team that's going on the road 3 straight times. That's tough to do in the NFL. And so this game will decide whether they make the postseason, I think.
You think so?
I do.
Okay. There was one team, speaking of Sunday, that you thought was a definitive wild card in the AFC, and that was the Cleveland Browns. I asked you, hey, what were going to be the 3? You said it's Cleveland, and then it's whatever the mixture comes at the very end. So we saw a team like Denver that you moved up 7 spots, a couple other teams 7 spots, Pete, but 9 spots for Cleveland after a win against Giants.
9 spots?
Well, a lot of teams lost, and they're also at 8
Right,
and 5.
I get that.
They're
9
ahead
spots.
of a
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Team that you thought they would go there.
Is that because Joe Flacco's elite? Is that what it is?
Joe Flacco's elite. Joe Flacco's playing good football. Now, Jacksonville's defense is terrible right now, but he was standing in there making making throws, making a lot of good decisions. I like what I saw from them, and I think Joe Flacco gives them a better chance to be a playoff team and maybe even win a playoff game.
He's the perfect fit at the right time for Cleveland. All right, he's got the big arms still. As you said, he can stay in the pocket, he can anticipate, he can take care of the football, make good decisions. And with that offensive line and ground game, with that defense, that is a winning formula. I would actually almost challenge people and say, why wasn't he on a roster earlier? Why wasn't he on the Jets, where he went into Cleveland last year and got a great win at the beginning of the season? All these other teams out there who needed a backup, an older veteran guy who's been there, done it before, won a Super Bowl, what were they thinking? I mean, look, maybe that was partially on him, and he didn't want to take whatever was offered him. But I think nowadays, with the way quarterbacks are getting injured, you're starting to look at that backup quarterback saying, maybe it's worth spending a little money on some of these guys or investing into that position, however you go about doing it, because in this case, this is a playoff team, and in large part because what Flacco's going to do for them the rest of the way.
It's interesting because a lot of these teams all play each other in the next couple, final 4 weeks. And I'm not just talking about division games. You see some cross, division games where these are all playing each other. It's going to be decided on the field, which I think is great. The NFL has their dream, and that's all they ever talked about. Meaningful games in December. Well, everybody's in it. That's all they want. They want meaningful games in December, and they have it.
By the way, the AFC North, outside of Baltimore, everyone's playing a backup quarterback right now. Kind of crazy when you look at that division that way. All those teams are still in the hunt. Baltimore, obviously, for the #1 overall seed, but the rest of them, I mean, Cincinnati's still in it. And they relying on Jake Browning, who's played really well so far. So it's going to be a crazy finish to the season this last month of football.
There's 7 teams in the AFC right now, separated by just 1 game for the 3 wild card spots, and the Browns have a leg up on the other 6 teams that are 7-6. Let's jump down to the New York Jets. Brady mentioned Joe Flacco was there. Maybe if he was still there, they'd have a better record. But let's give Zach Wilson some credit. Best game as a pro this past week?
One of them. He's had a few good games, but I think this was one of the best games for him because of everything else that went on outside of the football field, of that stadium. It was all the talk about, did he want to play, did he not? I don't care, and I think he doesn't either anymore. And that was some of the comments that I think that came out of this was, what's the worst they could do to him? Bench him again? And that's the one thing that I think as a quarterback, when you're a first-round pick, you have all this pressure. At some point, you got to go out there and play carefree and not really be concerned about the potential outcome or what the critics are going to say. And he's doing that. He's playing good football. He was playing good football earlier this season. I said when they benched him earlier, this is a huge mistake. He was, once Rodgers went down, he was always the best quarterback on that roster to try to lead them to victory. I have no idea why they needed to go to Tim Boyle or look at anyone, Trevor Siemian for that matter. It never made any sense. If anything, I think they've only hurt themselves with the way they've managed Zach Wilson over the entirety of his time with the Jets. And unfortunately, look, they're still in the hunt. Maybe Rodgers is able to get back. But it's going to be large part because of the growth of Zach Wilson, not how they've handled it. He's actually come on top despite all of that.
He looked like a different guy. I mean, and he did some good things before he was benched, too. That was the surprising thing. I'm with Brady. I think they made a mistake benching him, and he came back and played his best football. That guy you saw on Sunday is the guy they thought they would get when they drafted him 2nd overall. That's what they thought they'd get.
Give Hackett credit, too, and maybe it was a little bit the demise of the Houston Texans defense. I mean, there were some guys running wide open as well, and Hackett has been under a little bit of pressure, too, with some of the game planning. So kudos to both those guys, fighting through everything that's being said out there, find a way of getting a big win.
Joining the Jets in the Pete Prisco Power Rankings basement, the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, we're hearing news of today, of course, Justin Herbert, season-ending surgery due to that hand issue, Pete. And obviously, you put your rankings out before that, but you did know that Herbert was hurt. What needs to change in L.A. and to get a guy that you like a lot at quarterback some help there?
Well, they need a new coach, and they're going to get a new coach. I think that's the end of the Brandon Staley era. I think he's done. This team, it's terrible when you look at this record for Justin Herbert in his career and how it's underachieved. And you'd sit there and say, well, this guy's a star quarterback. Why is this team not very good? Well, the defense has been terrible. They've had a bunch of issues on the offensive line at times during his stay there. The receivers don't run that well, and they keep getting hurt. Bunches of them, they keep getting hurt. So I think there's a combination of things. But ultimately, it has to fall at the feet of Brandon Staley. Let's be real. He's a defensive guru, supposedly, right? Yeah, he's fix his defenses. His defense is terrible. Now, they weren't terrible the other day, but they've been terrible over the course of this season, and that's on him. So I think when you look at it, I think the change will come at the top. You might have a change at GM, too. You know, this Tom Telesco, the roster is okay. It's not great, so you might have a change there as well.
And the Kellen Moore experiment at offensive coordinator, I don't think has worked out so well. I think if you look at least in comparison to how the Cowboys look now with Mike McCarthy calling plays, how Dak looks, and how it's worked out for the Cowboys right now, they probably got the better end of the deal. Maybe that was a much needed move. But as far as the injury goes, like my long-term concerns for Justin Herbert are this. I had mallet finger. I broke my right index finger in my throwing hand. I had to sit out 6 weeks. They put pins in there, a couple pins to help stabilize the joint. But the problem is you're going to have a little bit of nerve damage. The ball's going to feel different. You know, once he is able to get out from having all casted up, they pull those pins out. If indeed that is what's going to happen, you know, he's got to get back to that feeling, if he can, as close as he can, of how the ball's going to come off his finger. The right index finger is the most important of any digit you've got when you're throwing the football. It controls the spiral, the spin, the accuracy, and it's the last little kind of touch on the football. So he's going to have to get through that. It sounds funny because it's such a small and it feels like it's insignificant injury, but it's huge in terms of obviously how it impacts his ability to play and play at a high level.
I don't know. Just get ready for Easton Stick against Aiden O'Connell on Thursday night. I mean,
that's
I can't
how we're kicking off
wait
the week.
Yeah, isn't that great? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to criticize any quarterbacks over
Hey,
there.
all I'm saying is, you know, people were saying stuff like this when Tommy DeVito first became the starting quarterback in the New York Giants.
Jake Browning?
Jake Browning, you are what you are. Well, guess what? Maybe these guys are a lot better than people realize. Like maybe, and I think, it plays into a much bigger conversation about college football and where it's at when you got a guy who's a rookie who's 25 years old, right? And a lot of these guys are going to start staying longer in college because if they can get paid while they're in college and continue to develop, it will suit them better when they get that shot. Because the truth of the matter is, none of these backups get developed anymore in the NFL. There's no quarterback school. There's less of an offseason. And I can promise you this, in game week, they do not care about a backup getting reps and development. They care about whoever's starting, making sure he knows the game plan and what he's got going on that week. So kudos to all the backups out there, especially the young guys, Tommy DeVito, everyone else who's out there. Kudos to those guys for not listening to guys like Pete Prisco and battling through.
Or listen to me when I was talking about Josh Dobbs and you were making him the next Hall of Famer and he's going to be on the bench.
First off, Dobbs played pretty well. He's been in 3 teams in 1 year. He's been in 3 teams in 1 year.
He was benched the other day. He was
unbelievable.
Benched.
You know what? We should rotate Pete out. We'll send him to NBC, send him to Fox. Let him rotate through and see how he does.
I'll tell you what. You get them 3 games. Everybody gets 3 or 4 games, and then you decide and you go from there. We haven't seen that with a lot of these guys yet. So
we've seen that with DeVito.
Yeah, and
there wasn't a lot of hype for the Paisan pass, and I kept telling you.
He's played good in 3 games, and yeah.
Gardner Minshew has him in the playoff hunt right now.
Well, and look what he was last week. He was terrible. You are what you are, Brady. You can't. There are aberrations.
You can say whatever you want.
There are aberrations all over the history of the league, but most of the time you are what you are.
Let me help describe this so Pete can understand, because his message never really translates, okay? The difference is for the guys who are at the top of the level, they stay at that higher level more consistently. All these guys can play. Every one of these quarterbacks can play in the NFL, and they can play at a high level. The difference is they can't do it as consistently enough, or they need a little more development and time, and they're oftentimes not going to get it. So for the guys who are right now, it's awesome to see. I hope we see more of it. He's not excited about it. I will watch this Thursday night. I'll be excited for that matchup.
Oh, I'll watch, but I'd like to see the real quarterbacks play.
We might get
they're real quarterbacks too.
Prisco network exchange, but then we might be just having to send you right back after a week.
They might decline.
Get this guy out of here.
You might see the ratings go up in all those states.
Oh, ratings will go up today on the Pick 6 podcast. They're going to have a ton of downloads because, Pete, you're going to be on it, right?
I am going to be on it.
Pete Prisco, Tuesday on the Pick 6 podcast. Check it out a bit later. Right now, the latest episode, Week 15 look-ahead picks with Katie Mox, Will Brinson, Prop Stars, and Emery Hunt. Up next, we turn our attention to the updated draft order. And, boy, is Will Levis prove that he's the franchise guy? Do the Bears need to stick with Justin Fields, or should they still take Caleb Williams #1? We got Brady and Ryan Wilson next.